what would you recommend for managing/receiving feedback on pain in the clinical world so as not to ignore patients' perceptions but still maximize the rehab process?
I can start.
All right.
So this was the reference where I was talking about how if you're a coach and you're coaching somebody who has some discomfort, say in their back, after every rep or after every set, and you're asking, how's your back feel? How's your back feel? How's your back feel? Constantly drawing more attention to that area, because we know that attentional focus plays a big role in people's experience of pain. And so I would make the recommendation to not do that when you're coaching people. This isn't to swing the other way and to say just to ignore any symptom that they report, but you don't necessarily need to go fishing for that. In a rehab context, if you are a skilled clinician and observer and communicator with your patient, then you can observe what they're doing and then just ask them what their thoughts are after a given set. How'd that go? Do you feel comfortable increasing the load? Something like that. And given that you've had the discussion, the education process ahead of time saying we're going to work in a range of tolerable symptoms and aim to progress gradually from there, then you can get that feedback. They can volunteer it to you rather than you go and fishing for it from them. So to the point where if they're feeling comfortable and okay, then you can celebrate that and say, that's awesome, that's great news, you're feeling good, that's a good sign, we can keep progressing in this process. Whereas if they volunteer that this is pretty uncomfortable, or I'm concerned about this, or this is freaking me out, or I don't want to go up anymore, then you can respect that and maybe have a discussion around it and modify the plan accordingly, rather than constantly going, again, fishing and drawing their attention to an area that their attention may not necessarily be on. Focusing their attention more on the task and celebrating the victory of that went well, I think is probably the way that I would go in a clinical context. I recognize, however, that in the clinical world, there's some tendency and potentially even rules and requirements to get patients' pain scores on a scale of 1 to 10, and that can be annoying, but you don't need to do a pain score on a scale of 1 to 10 after every set either. So I would do the bare minimum on that front as far as getting your pain scores, and then just focusing on the task and not unnecessarily drawing attention to where it doesn't need to be.
Yep. I think just a practical sense, I actually don't recommend that most coaches ask about it. You can, if you notice somebody who's demonstrating pain-related behavior, which during a lift would be some sort of like slowdown that occurs like during the descent of a squat, for example, or like hesitation during a particular lift that is abnormal because you've worked with this person before, you can ask like, hey, was that painful for you? Or you can ask them even a more open-ended question, like what's going on, just to get them to start talking about it. But and my general recommendation is to not ask, does that hurt, after any set. The only time I think that's appropriate is if you're trying new stuff to try to work around an existing injury and you're kind of like on the fly trying new things to see if they're still sensitive to that particular movement. So if someone had low back pain, like Leah, when we were training together in Santa Cruz quite frequently, if she had like a low back pain, we'd do like a mid-shin rack pull, and I would, after she did a set, I'd be like, how'd that feel?
How'd that feel is the right question there,
yeah.
I think.
Yeah. And then if that didn't, if she's, said, it's still pretty sensitive, it's still aching pretty good, we try another thing, and I would say, again, how does that feel? Something like that.
Yeah.
I think, the big thing that people, I don't know if they feel this way, but I certainly think it gets perceived this way. It's like, you have to be perfect with this pain stuff. Like, and if you mess up, like, dang it, I ruined it.
Yeah.
And it's not the case. Like, we're all humans, we all make mistakes, we all say the wrong things sometimes. The important part is to not compound an error with another error. Like, oh, did that hurt? And you're like, oh no, I said the H word. Dang, now you're freaking out about it, and they're like, what? And so some of that actually gets transferred to them, and they start feeling guilty about having pain, the normal human experience, and then the stuff can start kind of snowballing. And so I think it's just like, yeah, look, we all make mistakes and don't use the right language all the time. We have certain goals for how we communicate, and let's try to do the best we can. But in the coaching setting, I think it just plan on saying, how does that feel? If you notice something strange.
Yeah.